another Tim Talk. I've been taking some advice from different people about subjects they want me to talk about, and one is grief, and that's an interesting one when you apply it to kind of the overall what we're about here is working for our planet. So we're going to entitle this Tim Talk Grief. I'm just going to see where we go. And again, thank you everybody for being a part of this. Grief to me is something, first of all, I want you to understand a fundamental belief I have about grief. I don't think grief is just a human thing. Because we have our big brains and our emotions and all of our different feelings go around that, I understand that grief can be quite powerful in the human being. But man, I know animals have grief, all types of animals. I know trees have grief. I know our earth grieves. I remember that when I was growing up, there was this great movie where the red fern grows. And I remember it was about this family that had these two dogs, hunting dogs. And one of the dogs, they loved each other. They absolutely loved each other, these two dogs. And one dog died and they buried it. And the other dog gave up on life. It just went and it sat on the grave and grieved and grieved and grieved until finally it passed away. And a red fern grew there. So that's why it's called Where the Red Fern Grows. And I never forgot that. And I've seen elephants grieve for the loss of others. I've seen dogs do it. I've seen birds do it. I've seen all kinds of animals do it. And of course, humans, we've taken it to a whole nother level because we have our highly intelligent brain and our complicated emotions. And often in our culture, we don't allow ourselves the gift of grieving, the gift of being able to just feel sadness. And then in the feeling, when we're allowed to do it, we can emerge out of it through an understanding of what we're grieving for, and maybe with a new idea of how to go forward in life. But if we skip that process of grief, we often never really get out of it. It just lives within us, kind of under the surface, plaguing us for life. If we go into the grief and deeply go into it and then come out of it, often we can leave it behind and move on. It's a very necessary part of healing to grieve. Now, when you take it to the idea of the earth, I love the earth and I grieve all the time about what's happening to our planet due to human beings. I'm very educated to what's happening, and I read stories and I just cry, about what's happening to the coral reefs or what's happening with the plastics killing so many birds and animals and the oceans, and what's happening when I see pictures of polar bears swimming for a solid day because there's no ice to get up on because it's melting, and I mean, on and on and on. And I grieve by crying. I grieve by sometimes anger comes out, confusion. And at the end of the day, I let it go through, and then I just keep working for our planet. Working for our planet, doing everything I can, educating children, joining environmental groups, being of service on my land and other places, talking to people, educating people. That helps for the grief to disappear. But I have to live right now in these difficult times with a certain amount of grief living in me. And I have to manage it. Almost like, the word that comes is garden it. I've got to garden it so it doesn't take me over. But I also know it's a very important part of me growing and moving forward in my life. Um, I've had some of the biggest grief in my life from loss of relationship. Um, one of the most important things to the human being is to live in community, is to be loved and to love. And when we lose love in our life, a divorce or a breaking up of a dear friendship or a long-time business relationship, that is probably one of the hardest things to get through. It just leaves a huge void. And that's why it's really important, I think, in grieving, to be able to voice what we're grieving about, to be able to write it, to be able to talk about it, to be able to think about it without being interrupted. I go back a little bit in my life. My sister died at 42, and we were not extremely close, but we were brother and sister, and I loved her. And she died in my arms of a brain aneurysm. And I remember the grief was so deep. I remember she died in Sacramento, and I drove back to Shasta. It's about a 3.5 hour drive. I didn't stop screaming, crying the entire drive. And what I realized through that process is I needed to talk about it. I lost a really important relationship in my life once too, and it just saddened me terribly. And I realized I needed to talk about it. And one of the gifts that was given to me was a good friend at the right time to sit and just listen to me talk. Sometimes I would repeat the same thing over a dozen times. There was no fixing it. The friend didn't have to fix it. They just had to hear me, bear witness. And I worked it through my system. And in both cases, one day I woke up and I was okay. And I moved on in my life. And I don't think if I'd been allowed to have that grief and to have it witnessed by someone, or at least someone there some of the time to help me with it, I would be carrying the weight of it down. And I wouldn't be as good of a person as I am today, because there would be so much weight that I'd be carrying. So that's a grief, whether it's for an individual human being, loss of an animal is another thing. I mean, nobody grieves more. Nobody grieves more than when you lose an animal. I don't know what that is. I've sometimes felt almost guilty, like that when my father or my mother passed away. I grieved, but I grieved more for, at least outwardly and inwardly, for my dogs that have passed away. And I've always wondered that. What is that? I think part of that is dogs really love you unconditionally. They're not trying to get anything out of you. You know, sure, they want a treat now and then and a walk, but that's a little different. They just love you for who you are. And I mean, what a gift that is, to be able to be loved for who you are. And I think that transfers when they pass away. We miss that. We know that. We honor them through having a lot of grief. So there's different stages of grief. There's different ways to do it. So I think that it's really important, though, if we just take this full circle now back to grieving for our earth and what's happening. And underneath the grief is this, when you're talking about what's happening to our planet, is this unsuredness. It's the same thing we're going through with this COVID time. We don't really know what's going to happen. There's this anxiety of not really knowing what's going to happen that just kind of throws us off. Because if you go back to our ancestral times, control was everything. If we couldn't control our environment to some degree, we had a very difficult time living. So even though control is really an illusion in reality, because it can change instantly and you can't stop it, many things from happening, we like to think we're in control. And so here we are. Here we are. We have an uncertain future. And that's sometimes how it is with our own personal life. That's how it is with our planet. That's how it is sometimes with our friends and our family. And I said it's so important to have community, some communities. It's an uncertain time. And I say, grieve. Write it down. Tell your story. Be there for someone. Witness. Help someone. Tell them your story. But wash it through your system. Be committed to washing it through your system and coming out the other side a strong human willing to make a difference in the world we live in. Again, be an earth caretaker. Be a part of the solution. But don't ignore the need for grief. If you try to be tough and just hold it in, no matter what it is, a loss of someone you love, a dog, damage to our planet, if you don't work it through your system, it'll sit inside of you and you'll carry it like a weight, like a backpack full of rocks. And a side thing, if you don't work your grief through you, it can sometimes manifest inside of you in some disease or sickness or illness or mental problems, too much anger, things like that. Dis-ease creates disease. You've heard that one, right? That's why we got to be honest and work things through. Tell our story. Okay? So, to sum up, grief, it's real and it's huge. And if we think of it as this almost like a living being, a necessary part of life, even though we'd like to pretend that we didn't have to deal with it, and we do deal with it, then I think we'll be okay. If you go so far into your grief, whatever it is, for the planet, for someone you love, for an animal, and you don't feel you're getting help and you're not coming out of it, then you need to ask for help. And I want to say this strongly. You need to ask for help. Now, you might think it's a burden to ask somebody for help. No. You might think you might be embarrassed about what you're grieving. Let that go. That's ego out of control. When you ask for help, you give someone an opportunity to be a hero, to be of service, do good. Ask for help and watch. You'll get it. I know you will. So that being said, wish you all the best. Take care, have a good life, and just keep working for the good and work that grief through your system. Oh.